Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Greg Keily, and he's going to tell us about his near-death experience. Now, you were in the military when this happened?
Hi, Peggy. Yes, I was a Navy clearance diver in the Australian Navy, which is similar to a Navy SEAL team. We're doing a lot of explosive work, a lot of underwater work, ship attacks, deep water mine countermeasures, things like that. And I had a drowning in the Antarctic Ocean during operations where we were boarding illegal vessels in Australian waters. And basically, I ended up getting sucked underneath the Navy frigate in 17-meter swells at 2 a.m. in the morning, through the propellers, turned around, spat out, and then two boats tried to rescue me. And they, because of the swell, they ended up running me over and kept pushing me back underneath the water. So basically, I ended up transitioning into the quantum realm of not life or death, but in between, like a transitional area where I felt many different entities with me. The main feeling I got from that as I blacked out, if it was almost as if when I was transitioning, there was like a black liquid coming over my eyes, and I went from severe panic to calmness and acceptance. And what I felt was there was about 11 or 12 entities there, all excited with massive love for me to be crossing over. And then I was pulled out of that and woke up on the boat. So some fellas, some teammates jumped in the water, pulled me out, and I came to. And then I was taken back to the ship that we were boarding from, and I had suffered severe hypothermia, which is your body temperature is supposed to be around that 37 degrees Celsius mark, and I was about 33 to 34 degrees. So I was supposed to be dead anyway at that time. And then I collapsed again, and I went through the same thing. But I was receiving messages from both sides, from this life and also the next transition. And so if you're open to it, I can describe the situation, how it happened, and I'd love to tell my story.
Yeah.
So hopefully, yeah, that's interested a few people. Basically, as I said, I was Australian Navy clearance diver. It was that back in 1997. We were in the Antarctic waters boarding illegal vessels. Now, what we did is the seas were very, very large. They were 17 meter swells, so the ship would be there 1 minute and then it was just disappeared underneath the waves. 2 a.m. we got the call to boarding parties for the ships, and we were working with different special services in the Australian military. Now, instead of climbing down the side of the ship in those massive seas, which would take a long time and risk human life, what we did was we rigged up a rope. It was called a fast rope, and you'll often see the Navy SEAL teams or the special services guys jump out of a helicopter and slide down a rope. So we rigged up the rope on the side of the ship to go into a boat that was being towed alongside that the ship would launch. That was called a RIB, a rigid inflatable boat. So the boat would come alongside, hook up a shackle at the front, and then as the ship was sailing, the boat would get pulled in alongside it and it would motor alongside. So we set up a rope from right up to the top of the ship into the boat, and we would climb over the rail. I had automatic weapons. I had 3 or 4 days rations packed. I had a sledgehammer to break in doors. We had all the ammunition, plus we had ice suits on, like snow suits with boots and gloves and helmets and goggles. So we were ready to go, fully kitted out. Now, what would happen is we had two boats with about 8 or 9 fellas in each. The first boat of guys went down, all into the boat. They unhooked the shackle. The guy driving it pulls it forward, unhooks the shackle, then they went and sat behind the ship. So they were sitting behind the ship for the second boat to come for us to launch into. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second boat comes alongside, hooks up, gets pulled in the side of the ship. There's massive seas. I'm the first guy down on this next boat. So I've climbed over the edge on these big seas, and I've looked at the fellow, and he's given me the chop to go. I've jumped out and start sliding down the rope. Now, if you can imagine, it's cold. Got gloves on. There's seawater going everywhere. Actually, it was so cold that when the waves would hit the side of the ship, the water would instantly turn into ice. So it was actually snowing upwards. It was quite a phenomenal sort of experience. So I'm sliding down this rope, and if we slow it down a bit, I'll describe what happened. So when we're hanging onto the rope, you cannot stop. It's more of a guide. It's like a free-falling guide into the boat. As I'm going down the rope, big wave hits the side of the ship, pushes the boat that is being towed I'm going into out, and the shackle that's being pulled along snaps. So the boat that's being pulled alongside starts slipping back along the ship, and I go straight into the water. So the Navy ship's doing about 10 knots, which is about 10 miles an hour, and I'm getting pulled alongside the ship with all my gear on in freezing cold water. And I remember looking up and just seeing this massive grey wall, which was the side of the ship. And my hands, I'm slowly sliding down the rope as it's pulling me along. The boat, the rigid inflatable boat that I was supposed to come into, he's accelerated to come up right in front of me. And the man at the front, which is called a bowman, he's saying, let go of this rope to hang on to the boat. So I've done that, I've reached out and I've grabbed onto that, but he's still going 10 knots. So we're still all moving forward. I'm hanging on to the little rope on the side, getting pulled under the boat. If that makes sense. So they're going forward and I'm getting sucked under the boat with all my gear. We had communications on and I could hear that people were starting to stress up there, saying, man overboard, man overboard. What was happening is because of the weight and the cold, my fingers were slowly prying out, and I watched him and we had eye contact, and all of a sudden I just slipped under the boat. So I washed under the boat, and then the ship was going past, and as the ship goes past, it sucks everything in with the waves around it that it's creating. So I'm sucked up against the side of the ship. I'm looking up, and I'm just seeing this massive grey wall in front of me, and the ship in the distance, the back of the ship. And the first thing that hit my thoughts was, oh no, I'm going to be chewed up by the propellers here. So that's sort of going, how do I get out of here? I'm trying to push away from the hull of the ship, and I just kept getting sucked back into it because it's moving along. And so I'm looking down the side of the ship and I see this foaming mess at the back, which is the propellers, and the propellers rotate outside in. So panic starts, and the panic, and I was helpless. It's all of a sudden you have no control over what's happening, and I figured this is it. So the propellers are going outside in, they suck me under, and as I go under the water, it's that cold. Or a body response is I suck in a lot of water. It's like a shock. It's nighttime, so it's pitch black. I'm under the water, sucking it in, and I'm being thrown around like in a washing machine and between the propellers, punching and kicking and hoping. I don't know. You go through a fight, flight, or freeze mode, and I was just in fight my way out of here. My right foot hit something hard, obviously the hull, and I pushed off as hard as I could. And all of a sudden, I was in this black calmness. So I'm fighting to get up on top of the surface of the water, and my head pops above the water, and I see the back of the ship sailing off. So I pushed my way out, and I tell you the relief I felt at that moment, because I wasn't getting chopped up.
Right.
But then they brought in another problem, that I'm in the Antarctic Ocean at 2 a.m. in 17-meter seas, and the ship's sailing away. Struggling to stay afloat. Now, we had these special forces life jackets on, which they don't inflate automatically. You have to pull the toggle for them. And I was trying to find them, but with all the gear, I couldn't find it. We actually worked out it had been torn during the process, so it wasn't working. So I'm struggling to stay above the water with all my gear on, my backpack, sledgehammer weapons, all that. And so I kept going under, sucking water. On the communications, I hear the first boat that was being towed behind, full of the guy, my workmates, say, "We can see him, we can see him. We'll pick him up." So I can't see anything. It's just black with water going everywhere. I start spinning myself around trying to see them, and I've seen them coming towards me, but the waves were so large, they were sort of surfing sideways through the wave, and they ran straight over me. I had a little plastic helmet, my hands up, pushed my hands down, hit the helmet, pushed me under the water, and they went over the top of it. Make sense?
Yeah.
So the panic's there again, trying to get back up up onto the surface after sucking in a lot of water. Can't see them. And then I hear on my communications, my boat, the one that was supposed to go into, they said, "We'll get him." So they've come from the other direction. So I'm trying to see, and I'm treading water with all this gear. I'm starting to get quite slow because my joints are starting to slow up because of the cold. And I've seen them as well. They've come from the other direction. Same thing. They're almost going backwards, sliding backwards through these waves. And they've done the same thing, hit me, pushed me back under the water, and gone. So the panic, as you can imagine, is trying to fight to stay alive. And if anyone's ever had to do that, they'll understand that it is all-consuming, the fight to stay here on this plane. So I've gotten back up to the surface, and one of the boats is coming around me, trying to get closer to me, and I'm trying to tread water and follow them, but I keep going under at this stage. All my joints started freezing up, and I'd go under, and then I'd come back up. Now, when you go overboard, you're trained to, in cold water, to get into like a fetal position, bring your legs up to conserve body warmth around your organs. Because if you're thrashing around like this and I'm sending blood out to my hands and my legs, your body goes into what's called shock, and you die pretty quickly. So everyone's yelling at me because I could hear them through the communications in my ears saying, "Get into the rescue position." And every time I did that, I would sink like a stone under the water. So I'd struggle to get back up. Now, as I'm telling this, it sounds like it's a long process. The whole thing was about 7 minutes. So as they're going around me, I keep going more and more underwater. I'm swallowing a lot of water. And then it got to the stage where I just could not stay above the surface any longer because my joints, and with all the gear and the weight was so heavy, I just started sinking. Now, it was almost as if a split second had gone past, and my panic turned into just relief. And I started sinking down into the massive blackness of the ocean. I was swallowing a lot of water. As I think back to it now, and I'll talk about that in a second, how badly it affected my mind for so many years through PTSD. But as I think back now, I was just sucking in water. Everything was freezing. My eyeballs were freezing cold. My lungs, my throat, and I was just sinking down. And it was as if, as I said, but I think I said it just then. This calmness came over me, and then what I said earlier, it's like a thick black liquid just came over my eyes. So it wasn't as if I closed my eyes, but it was this. I had no choice as this blackness coming over my eyes. If that makes sense. And I just drifted to nothingness, just blackness, peace, and my body didn't exist. I felt as if I was just in blackness. Now that was the first time I felt this. I wasn't alone here. I felt as if there was multiple, and I couldn't see faces. I couldn't see, well, I could see shadows and what I perceived to be maybe bodies of people or things. And what I got was this immense excitement from them that I was coming towards them. Well, I was actually in the same blackness, like this space. We were darkness together, and the love that I felt for these beings that were there waiting, and there was 11 or 12. I could really see their silhouette, and then almost as if that was all in slow motion, and then it sped up, and I was back in the boat of the guys that had tried to get me the first time. Now, what they'd done is they'd form a human chain, and they were hanging down, thrashing around in the black ocean, and they'd grabbed my suit, and they'd actually pulled me out of the water into the boat where I came to again. And all I saw was all these, all my workmates, the fellas, the other clearance divers and the special forces guys just going, yeah, we've got him. And there was my communications was, I could still hear them at this stage. I'd come back, and I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed because I had stuffed up this process of this, the mission. So the first thing I said is, I'm fine. Let's keep going. You know what I mean? So they said, okay, look, he wants to keep going with the mission. Let's just keep going. And they said, no, hold. So we were just following behind the ship. And I'm going, right, so checking all my gear. Actually, a pistol had come out of my holster with all the panic. I didn't see that, but I had my main weapon. And I thought, okay, so we're ready to go. And then it came back through the communications. No. We've got to get him back in to the ship to monitor his vital organs now. See what's going on. So I transitioned from the rib that picked me up into the original one I was supposed to get into, and they took me back to the boat. And I was saying to them, "Oh, I can't believe this is my fault that the mission's finished." I was just absolutely devastated. Because this is what we trained for 6 months was workups for this. Anyway, got me back into the boat. They stripped down all the gear off me. I walked into the wardroom, which was the officers' mess, which was made into an emergency room. And another thing, anyone that knows anything about hypothermia, what I said before, is you're supposed to lie there and not be active. But I'm walking around, doing all this stuff, totally oblivious to the fact that what my body's going through is shock. We've walked back in, and they start peeling off all the big gear that I've got, the snowsuit and everything. Bang, I was gone again. So I just collapsed on the ground. Now, this transition into quantum, this subatomic level, which I now study and I help people with their mental health around, because it affected me so much. This was a better experience, because it was as if I was there for months on end. It was as if time didn't exist. And I went back to that same darkness, but it became a bit clearer. Behind these silhouettes of people, we'll call them people or beings, there was light there. And I felt this connection again, this amazing love. And finally I was home. And it was like I was going home to this thing and to this place. And everyone was there just so excited. And I'm getting a bit emotional, starting to come back, and it always does when I think about it, but not in a negative way like it used to, but I'll explain that in a bit later. But so I was there. There was the same entities there. And I heard this voice, this beautiful voice. It was a woman's voice. It was a female voice or a feminine voice. And it was saying, "You can come back now, darling." I think she was saying darling and love. "You can come back now. It's okay to come back." And this gets me emotional because I was in that form where what do I do? Because this was coming from a different direction. And I didn't know where directions were. It was as if it was just everything but nothing, sort of. It was hard to describe. I've got one area saying, "Yay, come back," and it's all exciting. And then another one saying, "No, not no, but it's okay, you can come back." And the voice got more intense, louder and louder and louder. And I felt I had no control over my direction I was going in. So I ended up still darkness, but I could feel my right hand. I didn't know it was my right hand. I just felt like and it was like a really light touch. And as I was coming back from nothingness into blackness, but back into my body, because my body didn't exist out there. Nothing existed in a mass, in a form. I had recognized there was like a little angel that was stroking my hand and getting me to come back. And it was an officer. It was a female officer, a doctor. And obviously she didn't know where I was, but she was just trying to get me to come back. And the touch was really fantastic. And it was so beautiful. Like, it was just such a loving voice, calm. And I thought, if I think about it now, talking about it, it's amazing how you hear the stories of people actually knowing what's going on around them. And if there's violence or everything, it's sort of, they're detached, but they can still feel it and see it. And so I was coming back, but I was lucky there wasn't the violence there anymore or the panic. It was just a beautiful guidance to come back. And as I came back, I understood that there was someone holding my hand and stroking it. And then I came back and I'd opened my eyes and I saw the blue mask and the hat and this woman talking to me going, it's okay, darling, come back. And that's where they were saying my body temperature was 33 degrees. They've had a large plastic blanket over me, and they were pumping warm air into it to try and calm down my body from having all the blood around my organs to start slowly coming back out and getting back into the normal state of a human form. Anyway, that lasted quite a while. That lasted probably about 5 or 6 hours. And then they said, how you going? They took my vital signs and I was all okay. And so I just grabbed all my gear, went back down into the ship, into the mess. And because the ship was going up and down, so largely I had to strap myself into my rack. And I tried to go to sleep as if nothing had happened. So I was lying there and I was trying to relive it, but it felt like it was a foggy dream. And then about 3 hours later, we got a call, ship's the boarding station. So we were back doing it. This time, though, we went by helicopter and we took a couple of ships. Funnily enough, as I was sliding down the rope, because the sea was so large, the ship we were trying to board, the helicopter's up here, was going up and down, and all its aerials and everything were moving. And so the helicopter kept pulling back and going over. And as luck would have it, there's me sliding down the rope, and I've looked down, and the helicopter's come back, and the rope's just flapping in the breeze, and down below is probably 100-foot drop to the ocean again. And I've gone, no, I'm not going through this again. So I locked off. I locked off as hard as I could, and I stopped, and I looked up, and I could see the lady, the guy that directs the helicopter, get it back over the ship. And as it went back over the ship, one fellow jumps out, grabs the rope, wraps it around himself, and lies down onto the deck of the ship. And it's the same guy that pulled me out of the water the night before, same bloke. Mm-hmm. And so I come down. So he saved me twice, this guy. Came down, on we go. We took the boat, and the mission was done. So it was a good story. You know, it was a good story. You wouldn't believe what happened to Keely. You know, this happened and this happened. How did you feel? I'm going, oh, yeah, it was, just something that happened. Now, some 7 or 8 years later, I'd left the military. I joined the police. I was doing fine there. Nothing happening. No influence of that. It was still just a story. And then I remember driving into an underground car park to park my car. And for some reason, as I got to the boom gate where you pay money and the gate lifts so you go in, as I went into the darkness of the car park, that same feeling just hit me, where the blackness came over my eyes and I was not in control anymore. And I just went through the same motion. It was like I was triggered back to that moment. Fight, flight, freeze. I couldn't fight anything because I couldn't understand what was happening. The blackness was coming over me. I was losing control. I panicked. Panic attack, massive panic attack. Jumped out of the car, bolted, flights up to the ground level, and I was having this panic attack. People had to go down and bring my car out, not knowing what was happening. Now, this got more and more and more happening, more and more and more intense. And it got to the stage where I had a couple of kids as I came back. That was one thing I thought, what's my purpose here? I have to have some children before I die. If this happens again, a message I got maybe. So the kids were quite young. They were probably, by this stage, we say 7, 8. So they're probably about 9 and 11 years old. And I couldn't even go into the shopping centres like Walmart or Woolworths. And every time I would go into a place where I couldn't see an exit, I had no control. It was going into that blackness, and the panic would happen. And it's very hard to, if you've trained in, and I'm just saying this for everyone, to all of a sudden have no control over you. Now, being who I was, trained into a military male dominant sort of position, and then in a police, in control all the time, to have no control was not only embarrassing, it was humiliating. I felt worthless. What's my point here? There's no point living. There's no point being here. I couldn't even go into shopping centres. And the kids would say, oh, Dad's just having another episode, because it became the norm for them. And I was and I went through years of counselling, psychiatrists, and talking about the problem. And everyone was quite fascinated with the story. And I felt I just kept reliving it and refueling it until I came across an unconscious mind healer who used hypnotherapy for me to connect with my unconscious and go back and remove the emotions I had attached to the event. Because our unconscious, because we exist in many states of consciousness in this life, and which I had transitioned through all 3. Most of us live in the 2, which is self-conscious, runs 5% of our life. Our unconscious, that runs 95% of life. It beats your heart, it reproduces cells, it blinks for you, it grows your hair, does all this stuff. And we're unaware of it. And then we've got our superconscious, our source, our spirit, whatever you want to call it, And I transitioned to all three, but had the problem of releasing the unconscious emotion I'd attached to it. So once I learned to do that, everything stopped. It was as if, and this happened over like a couple of months period, but for years I'd suffered this. So I thought, I have to help as many people as I can do the same. And it just felt right. Everything felt right about it. It helped me. This is my calling. I had to go through it all. First time ever I understood that. And I went through years of self-sabotage. Every time I would get successful at something, I would quit, or I would leave or walk away and join another company to start at the bottom, because I had this unconscious acceptance. I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. So I can't be successful. I can't be happy. And it's amazing how your unconscious works like that. And it could be something that happened when someone was a child and they go through sabotaging their life and happiness and success. But this was what happened with me. And so I studied as much as I could around quantum physics, quantum theory, what the transitions are, how our levels of consciousness affect us positively, negatively, limit us from what we accept from the environment we grew up in from conception to 7 years old, from what our parents, siblings, teachers told us, you're no good at this, we can't afford this, all these things that we attach unconscious emotions to. We can actually remove the beliefs, the limiting beliefs, the fear around it. And that's what happened to me. So now that's what I do. So I created my own company called How's Your Headspace, HOW''S, your headspace. There's 2 words, headspace. And all I do now is I guide people to connect to their different levels of consciousness, to remove emotions from past trauma, so they no longer affect them today, which is what happened with me. But then we also align them through superconscious, that high part of why they went through what they went through, to now create an amazing life for their true purpose, why it all happened. And we understand there is a why, but some of us haven't reached that why yet. You know what I mean? So a lot of people want help, but then never take it up when it's offered because they're just not ready yet. And there's nothing wrong with that, because everyone's on their own path. And this is what I learned. And I know, and I'm just so happy now that I know that if and when I ever do transition, I won't be alone. There's a bigger picture there. But none of us are meant to go too soon. We're meant to find out the reason, remove the emotions, find the reason why, and then go forth and learn, love, and teach. So this is what I do, and this is how that event totally changed my life. I didn't go into the light and see the other side. It was more of that transition stage, like a mezzanine.
So yeah, I know what that's like to drown, not with icy water, but that feeling of trying to get your head above water. Like I say, I was only 5 years old when I drowned, but trying to get your head above water and you can't. And that fear, and that mine was pain in my throat, or because I didn't have all the freezing like you had. But so how does that work now with the PTSD and realizing that there was a reason for this, like why it happened?
Yeah, and so I'd gone through life saying, why haven't I done this before? Or why couldn't I stick to that? And so the reason I understood was I have had 41 different careers in my life because of this. And so I've been dealing with multi-million-dollar investors. I've dealt with, I've done security. I've dealt with cleaners. I've cleaned and polished pots and pans, to owning a very successful couple of businesses as well. So I can communicate with everyone. And what it's allowed me to do is now see there was a reason why it all had to happen because of what I'm doing now. So for some reason, that's my purpose here. And now I help people understand the why around what they've gone through. But you can't just do that, because they need to release the emotions around the events that they went through. Because our unconscious, it's a 100% emotional part of us that attaches a good or bad emotion to everything that we do. For what reason? So you can take all this experience with you when you go from quantum into the mass. So I base everything, I did a lot of study on the quantum physics, as I said, quantum theories, which talk about what Einstein said, E equals mc squared, where you and I exist first and foremost as energy. We are brought into this life creating and start becoming a mass inside your mum's tummy. However, you don't let that energy state go. So you can, and if I ask you how many times you've met someone and you just get that feeling, that gut feeling, there's just something not right about this person. And quite often we'll call them red flags. We see all these things that are saying, I'm going to get hurt by this. Whether it's doing an action like driving or riding a bike or whatever, or meeting someone, you get the feeling it's not right. And that is because we are all energy, as Einstein says. We are connected with source and everything, universal energy, God, whatever you want to call it, previously to coming in here and living in this life as a mass. So when I started understanding that, the reasoning behind it, then it's easier for me to explain to people, okay, this is why you're going through these triggers, the trauma. This is why you have anxiety, depression, eating disorders, self-abuse, self-sabotage. And it could be as simple as growing up in a domestic violence family, where you're going through that same trauma. So like you went through the drowning. That was a very traumatic event. Your unconscious attached a negative emotion to it. When you're a 1-month-old child and mum and dad are fighting, or dad's drinking, or even if he's away working and trying to do the right thing, you're attaching an emotion to all of this. Now, we might say parents yelling around a newborn or a child up to the age of 5, 6 is just life, stress. But, you know, and it is, we're all just being human. We're just living our life. And unless people are actually negatively doing things to kids or around kids or to other people, we're all just living our life, but we're all attaching emotions to the events. Now, you can say, well, it was just, you know, I was going through a stressful situation and I was drinking a lot when you were a newborn child because I couldn't afford to pay for you. The child is attaching such a negative emotion to that experience because they don't know if they're going to live through it. You know, mum or dad screaming, carrying on. They go through those same things you and I went through, fight. And they're too young to fight, right? Flight. Half of us at that age, we can't walk. We can't even eat solids, or freeze. So the child freezes, attaches a significant emotion to that event, which is a traumatic event, and then goes through life being affected by that event. So what I mean? So if I say to you, you say, oh, I'd love this Barbie doll, Dad, and I say, we don't have the money for that. Can hardly afford to put food on the table. You've attached an emotion to that. We can't afford that. Can't even afford to put food on the table. So then that child will go through life most of the time thinking that they can't afford things. They're struggling to put food on the table because their unconscious accepted that way back at 1 month old, 2 years old, whenever it happened. And so then because it's an acceptance at that stage of our life, there's no reasoning, there's no what's right or wrong at that young age. We just accept it like a sponge. We just absorb it all as being the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then when we go out into the real world at the age of 5 or 7, when we go to preschool and start seeing other families and how other people are living, we start wanting happier things, a happier life, a happier family, nicer cars, nicer houses. So we consciously want things, but our unconscious, it's too late. It's already accepted our limitations that we had during those first years. Does that make sense? And then what happens is we go through life with those same limitations. So if you can outsource, now I do this, I do online sessions. I never do any face-to-face now. So I help a lot of people in the United States and England, Ireland, and the UK, Australia, everywhere, to simply access their unconscious, to go back and release emotions. And then what you tend to do is look at everything as a lesson that's made me stronger, rather than it's an emotional attachment for life. And this is what I do now. I love it because everyone finds what they need to find. I don't implant anything. It's like I'm a guide to just guide them to where they need to be. And I was very lucky because I went through all of that crap, all of that hardship, all of that pain, that mental anguish, nearly lost my family, nearly took my life twice. Everything was for what I'm doing now. So it was a blessing in disguise, but I didn't see it at the time, and none of us do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll get this sent out to you probably in the morning.
Fantastic. And so if anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me through the website, How's Your Headspace? Or if they want to send me a message, it's just support, SUPPORT, at howsyourheadspace.com.au, because we're in Australia. And I'm happy to guide some people. I've got videos out there. I'm happy to send them some stuff that might open their mind to what our existence is and how to access those states of consciousness to help themselves, or they can join up to my programs. But my purpose now, I understand, is to just help people get over their mental challenges. So I've really enjoyed it, Pegi. This time I wasn't so emotional telling the story, which is great, which shows that, you know, all the emotions are just gone from there. But if I could just say one last closing comment, is the feelings I got both through my unconscious and superconscious at that transition level was so much overwhelming love that it just made me happy, you know, to start enjoying what I have, what I do, gratitude. And all that there was love. There was no hate. There was no nastiness. There was nothing outside there. You know what I mean? So if we connect with love, it's the biggest, most powerful thing we could ever do.
All right. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And I look forward to helping people or just seeing how this came out on your show.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.